identifying the challenges that students have for success. What's getting in their way of them being successful? And then how do we select and implement diverse methods to support student learning? So the first part is identifying essential course components, and that's pretty basic. What are the skills our students need to know? What is the content? What are the learning goals? What do we want them to get out of our courses? And what do we expect them to be able to do by the time they finish our course? What are those end goals, and how do we know that they can demonstrate proficiency? One way to rethink some of this is a lot of times we have in an education where we're all about goals and then assessing that. And so really thinking about moving beyond the basic skills of reading, writing, solving math problems, and rethinking what those look like in a way that is a little bit more focused on what we truly are wanting our students to know. Are we expecting them to read information, or do we want them to take in information? Are we expecting them to write? Maybe they can express it in a different way. So what are the expectations? Now, if you're in a writing class, obviously you probably want them to write. But if you're not in a writing class, do they need to write, or can they express it in a different way? And so rethinking the goals of your course is important in the fact that we can help engage those students in different ways, and we can help them be successful despite what their different needs might be, whether they have they're an English language learner and writing in English might be a struggle for them. Maybe they can express it in a different way, or do they have a learning disability, or whatever their needs might be. If we can look at what is it we truly want them to be able to do, that's how maybe we might want to write our student outcomes. The second step is examining your learning environment. What are your curriculum expectations? What social expectations do you have in the classroom? Do you expect them to be quiet? Do you want them interactive? To me, I feel like if students are quiet, they're not learning. So my expectations are very different than somebody else's. What technologies do you use? Are they accessible to all students? Assessment strategies. What does your classroom look like? Is it a large lecture classroom? Is it a small class with round tables in it? I have to, whether I teach in our big auditorium here or a small classroom with round tables, it affects how I teach. And so understanding that learning environment makes a big difference. And then with that in mind, thinking about the challenges that the students might face. Based on this diverse group of students that we have, how is the content or the academic language? How is all of this, what challenges might they have? And one way you can think about it is as barriers to learning. What is it about your content, your learning environment, your instructional methods? What might get in the way of their learning? If language is, if they have a need for English language learning supports or something like that, maybe they can access the content in a way that it's being read to them, or they can read it in a native language. So what kinds of things can we do to make sure that we kind of break through those barriers to their learning process? And then lastly is selecting and implementing diverse instructional methods. And this is where universal design comes in, is the idea that universal design methods, they're based on, as Joy said, research. We want to make sure that they are research-backed instructional practices, but we want to use a variety of different methods to make sure that we are providing students access and engaging activities. So the way Universal Design for Learning frames it is through these three main concepts of representation, or what they're learning, what is the content that they're taking in, action and expression, which is how are they expressing what they know. So it's kind of that concept of assessment. How are they able to demonstrate that they have learned what you want them to learn? And then engagement. How are they working with the materials to help make the learning develop their own meaning? And so we kind of, they've taken it further to break each of these three content or concepts into different principles. And so like when we think about representation or what is it that they're learning, we think perception, visual and auditory information. Can we present it in different ways? Can we let them see things differently, hear things differently, read it in a different language, things like that? How do we allow them to take in language and symbols? How are we helping them learn the vocabulary? Maybe it's pre-teaching the vocabulary, helping them with language prompts and things like that, and using multiple medias to help with that. And then comprehension. We want to make sure when they're taking in content that we're comprehending it. So maybe supporting them by laying out when we're doing our lectures or our activities, giving them some kind of pattern or pointing them towards the big ideas that are most important so that we can help them develop those relationships, and then activating their background knowledge. And so I wanted to give you kind of some examples of how I'm thinking of this in, say, a higher ed setting, obviously. Sometimes I do this differently if I'm teaching my elementary ed students here, is, if you're talking history, maybe this is actually a documentary on the Declaration of Independence. So you could have them watch videos to take in the information versus reading it out of a textbook. Or listening to podcasts. A lot of times there's podcasts out there that have great information they can participate in. Reading it online from a blog or a news outlet or some kind of obviously legitimate, appropriate source. But there's a lot of content online, and students are digital, are so digital savvy that they can find great information out there. Or another way to pick up information is through Twitter chats. Our kiddos these days are very, the social media is huge in their lives, and they use Twitter a lot. They use Snapchat and Instagram, and why not tap into these social media outlets that they can use for learning process. So those are just a few examples of different ways that we can represent information or help them learn content in addition to our traditional textbook type of activity. And then engagement. I'm not going to really talk about this too much because Joy did an awesome job about talking about engagement. But one thing I would like to add is the concept of self-regulation, and the idea is that maybe students will be more engaged if they have the ability to self-reflect or set their own goals within the learning process. So helping students by providing opportunities to do this. But here are just some examples for engagement. This is actually from we had a College of Education Summit last weekend. And Dr. Jonah Firestone and I did a presentation on UDL and technology. And so he's got a great virtual reality or augmented reality lab. And so the attendees were looking at space using augmented reality. So this is just one way they can engage. They can learn through this more high-tech technology. But also, helping them engage by structuring their learning using graphic organizers of some kind. They don't have to be worksheets. They can be anything you can think of, but giving them some kind of structure to help them organize their learning. Questioning strategies such as Costa's levels of questioning or Bloom's taxonomy, helping them to think deeper and further, but they may need prompts such as, word stems or language. Here's examples of vocabulary at the different levels of questioning to really help them think through more difficult concepts. I teach special education law, and we use a lot of case studies to learn about the law. And so case studies are a great way to talk about real life situations. Another way to keep students engaged are office hours and how we utilize our office hours. Not just my door is open, but how can we get students to come by our office and talk to us and maybe use those times for promoting discussion and thinking about the content that they're learning. And you know, I have a freshman up in Pullman, up there with you guys, and she's in History 105, and her professor has office hours in her dorm. And so she spends a lot of time going up there and meeting with him because he's accessible and he's away from his office and it's less intimidating for the students. Another way of engaging are having Twitter chats. They use Twitter chats all the time for different things. And so utilizing technology they already know. Now moving into our last thing, oops, I'm running out of time, this is one of our,
that's a good one.
I know, this is one of our favorite, my favorite cartoons is how do we make this accessible? How do we know what each person can do? When they all have different needs. And so that's where action and expression comes in. And how are we allowing them to express what they know? Physical action, how we letting them build something or use media for communicating what they know. Giving them different tools. If they're writing a paper, maybe giving them prompts or speech to text software. Things like that. So maybe in engineering, letting them design a model instead of a different way. Or I use this a lot in one of my classes where they have to learn about different disabilities. And then I bring in teachers from the community and they do a poster presentation session. Doing a timeline or creating their own website about information or writing a blog. I have some different examples and because I'm out of time, what I can do is I was going to post my PowerPoint and give you a link. Should I do that, Valerie? Or should I just kind of go through?
You can kind of just push through really quickly and then I'll post the PowerPoint online later.
Okay, sounds good. I just have some examples here from different higher ed areas like construction management, and gives examples about how they've looked at challenges in the classroom. I also have an education, music, and then criminal justice. So what I'll do is I have a link already for a Google Drive or a Google folder that I'm going to put this and a couple other things about universal design for learning in. So if you want to look at it more, you can do that. But this is probably another one of my favorite quotes is really getting kiddos involved and making their own meaning in their learning is the key to student success. So anyway, if you can see, there's the link to the drive of stuff for putting stuff in. And then you can kind of access. I have a blueprint that is based on kind of a lesson plan or blueprint that you can utilize to help kind of promote thinking about these things. That'll be in that folder as well. So thank you.
Okay. Go ahead and share this. And doing this from my PC. Hi, I'm Tom Tripp, and one of the things I'd like to do when I have a little bit more time and interview other professors is ask them to think of an undergraduate course that they took where they were most motivated and most engaged, or least motivated and least engaged. And typically the type of answers that I'll get back, the topic was really interesting or the topic was really boring. It was a skill or knowledge they know that they were going to need for a later course or for a career or somewhere in life, or they knew that they would never use it again or believe that they would never use it again. The class was fun, the class was tedious. It was clear that hard work was required to pass the class versus it wasn't. It was clear what they had to do. And then there's an issue about whether they had sufficient skills. And so what I want to do is talk about two theories from management, which is my area, that have been fairly well tested and supported, that tend to get employees to be motivated and engaged, and then apply that to the classroom setting, which in my teaching I've been applying for a long time, and give some suggestions for there. And one of the theories in particular actually backs up a lot of what Sarah and Joy were saying as well. So you'll see some redundancy there. One other sort of quick thing is, one of the best proxy measures I've ever found for how engaged students are, and maybe you found the same, but when I watch other people teach, I always sit in the very back of class. And what I do is I look at and I see, are students' phones out and what are they looking at? Or if their laptops are open, what are they looking at? And in at least engaged classes, I'll see a third of the students on a material that has nothing to do with class. My favorite or least favorite example was I was watching a class and a student was sitting in the front row and had a hockey game on his laptop. Very distracting. Anyway, so I want to talk about sort of two theories. I want to talk about a theory of extrinsic motivation and a theory of intrinsic motivation. So just to review, extrinsic motivation is if you're extrinsically motivated, you're engaged, you're working hard, you're doing it because you anticipate getting some sort of reward, or you're trying to avoid a punishment or something unpleasant. An intrinsic motivation is you do it because it's somehow fun or meaningful to you. And part of what I want to argue is in a well-designed and well-run course, you want both extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. I know we all would love our students to be nothing but intrinsically motivated, but some won't be, and so the extrinsic really helps. And even if you aspire to inspire your students with intrinsic motivation, you always want to make sure that at least the extrinsic motivators or demotivators are not working at cross purposes with what you're trying to do intrinsically. So the first theory is one of the extrinsic motivation. I'll just sort of lay out the whole theory for you and explain what all this means, and then start applying it to a classroom setting. So this is called expectancy theory. It's well known in management. Yeah.
Hey, can you kind of change we can see your presenter view, and it's really hard to see the screen on our side. Can you flip?
I don't understand what you're saying.
You need to go to full screen on the slides.
Go back to share screen. Go back to share screen and choose the full screen version of your PowerPoint by clicking on it.
We can see the presenter view. It has all of the slides and what the next slide is.
Okay, didn't do that in the test. All right, I don't want you to see that. Hold on a second.
Sorry.
So let me get back into Zoom.
Share screen.
Why is Zoom not coming up?
Unfortunately.
Fun to Mac.
It's because it's probably on the very top. You'll have to scroll all the way to the top. It probably hit itself.
Hover over the top and it'll drop down.
Yeah, it's not doing that. Completely frozen.
Oh, nice.
This is aggravating.
Oh, there we go.
Hey, we can see that.
Okay, so you can see that?
Now you got it. Yep, you got it now.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent, thank you. All right, so this is a theory of expectations. So what are the expectations that employees, and then we'll talk about students, have with regards to things they care about in the class, particularly in terms of extrinsic outcomes? And there's really sort of three sets of expectations that they have, or beliefs that they have. And it's kind of a badly labeled theory, but if we start over here at the right, this is what's called valence, and is, do they value the work outcomes? Do they value the consequences? Are they big consequences, like a big pay raise? Or are they trivial consequences, like a trinket? Then there's this notion of what's called instrumentality, and that is performance instrumental to achieving these outcomes? So what work outcomes will they get as a result of the performance? Or simply, is their performance actually tied to these outcomes? Will they receive, for example, higher pay if they work harder and better? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, in many organizations. And then the third expectation is called expectancy, which is the same name as the whole theory. It's confusing, but it's whether they believe that they can even hit the performance targets that are required to get the rewards. So there might be reasons that they believe it or that they don't believe it. So variations on this is, if we think in the middle in terms of instrumentality, the expectation, and I can phrase this as a question, are there consequences for doing as I'm told? Are there consequences for meeting the standards that have been set out for me? Another way of saying is, if I succeed, will I be rewarded? If I fail, well, punishment's kind of a strong word, but will it be unpleasant? And there's probabilities. It's not just either or. The second expectation is, do I even care about the consequences? So yeah, there might be a consequence tied to my performance, but do I care? Is it a big deal to me? Is it a big raise again, or a trinket? Is it slap on the wrist or a more substantial punishment? And then back over here so variations, so back over here, expectancy is, am I capable of doing as I'm told? So variations on this question are, do I understand what my boss or professor wants? If I don't understand, then I don't believe I'm capable of doing what I'm told. Is it realistic? Do I have the skills? Do I have the time and resources? Do I have control over my circumstances? So these are the way that students might think about it. Now, let's apply this theory to students. So if a student would ask in terms of instrumentality, are there consequences for doing as I'm asked? In other words, a student may ask, if I succeed, will I be rewarded? So for example, if I score good category on the rubrics, will my grade be higher? Or does everyone get A's? Or does everyone get C's? If I speak up in class or even go to class, will my grade be higher? If I attend class, will lecture material be on the exam or needed to write a paper? If I read the readings, the texts, will that be on the exam or needed to write a paper? If I don't read the text, will I not be able to follow lecture? If I put in the extra effort to write well on the assignment, will the prof notice it, grade it, or even provide me feedback? Is there added value for going to class, or is class redundant with the readings? It's a key one. I'll come back to that. Another question I might ask is, if I fail or somehow misbehave, will I be punished or will unpleasant things happen? For example, if nobody answers the professor's question when the prof puts a prompt out to the class, will we all sit there in uncomfortable silence until one of us breaks, or will the professor answer his or her own question? You recognize that one. If I cheat, will I be caught? If I'm caught, will the professor actually grade me down or report me? They ask these kinds of questions. If I don't show up to group meetings, will my group grade really be any different than it would have otherwise? And obviously you want, there's preferred answers to these questions in terms of students being more extrinsically motivated. Now, one other thing I want to, before I get to that, so one of the things I try and convince, when we talk about you design courses so that they answer these questions the right way, first is that not everybody should get A's, or not everybody should get C's. And it's helpful to persuade students of that. So the way I persuade students is, in the very first day of class, I show them this graph. So my Management 401 course, I show all the grades I've given out in the last 10, 11 years. And what I'm trying to draw their eye to there, and I make explicit when I show this, is that there's variance. There's a wide distribution. It's not impossible. The average grade's like, B or so, which is par for the course with WSU, where the average GPA is 3.2. But the point is that there's variance. And so they can, if they work really hard, they can get A's. If they don't work really hard, they can end up with a grade perhaps less than whatever it is that they want. So that'd be one design feature. Another thing I recommend, if you've got a cheating problem, you've got to catch and report the cheaters. Another thing that might help is making sure that both class and reading concepts are not redundant. In fact, one of the things I've seen in the College of Business, and when I've talked to grad students and other programs outside the College of Business who are looking for advice for teaching, a very sort of common situation is, hey, half my students don't show up to class and the half who do don't do the readings. Well, why is that? well, we explore it a little bit, and what we get to, I take a little my time getting there, and I say it a little bit more nicely, but I'll be concise here, is the reason is because they lecture from the textbook. And so lecture is completely redundant with the readings, and so students have figured out they can do one or other, but there's no reason to do both. So another thing that I would recommend is when you're grading homework, spend a lot of time, as much as you can afford, marking it up so that students know that you're actually reading it. Particularly for, I find it's really helpful for papers. They know that you're paying attention. So, students' valence questions. Do I care about the outcomes or consequences? How big is the reward? How harsh is, again, we don't punish students, but is, an unpleasant outcome? Well, is the assignment or activity that you're asking me to do, is it a significant portion of the grade? Does my prof seem to care if I do it or not? And our favorite, do I need to know this for the exam or the paper? Well, I need to know this in subsequent courses. Is the subject something I can use in my life? So they ask these kinds of questions, and so what you want to do then is design courses so that they realize that they care. So if there's something you really want them to do, like I want students to speak up in my class, then I make sure that there's a significant grade component on it. So I grade for participation. I want them engaged in exercises. I award participation in exercises. I believe in rewarding the behavior I want, which is because that's what this theory says you should do. If there's a topic, I will try and sell it to them. Here's why you need to know this. And in business, it's easy. I tell horror stories. If only this character in this case knew what you just learned, they would have avoided, running their company into the ground and having to get rid of employees or making a major career mistake or something like that. But I think it's important to constantly sell to students if they don't understand how it's a subject they might be able to use in their life. See how we're doing on time here. I got just a couple more things here. In terms of students' expectancy questions, if I try, will I succeed? Is it clear what the prof is asking for? Is it realistic? Do I have the skills? Do I have the time? Was it enough time to do this task? Do I have control over my circumstances? For example, over my teammates. This is a big issue with group projects. The students often feel that they can't control what their teammates do. It can lead to a lot of group conflict. So what should happen instead is that you should design courses so that the performance requirements are crystal clear, setting goals effectively, using smart goal setting, providing, as others have talked about, prompt feedback as fast as you can so they can learn through iteration, and to use team projects probably more sparingly than we do. The last thing, and I've got, just a couple minutes left here?
You're doing good. Got about 4 minutes.
Okay, and this is going to back up what Joy and Sarah were saying anyway. So now let's switch to intrinsic motivation. And there's this well-known model called the job characteristics model, and it's how would you design a job at work so that employees would love to do it, they would want to do it. So employees would say, I can't believe you pay me to do this job. I do it for free, right? And then apply that to classrooms. So with the model, and it's received a bit of research support, is it's trying to predict, well, one, motivation, but also workplace satisfaction and how effectively people do the job. So things that we're very concerned with students in our classes. What tends to lead to those outcomes is what's called a critical psychological state, is that they experience the work as meaningful. They have a sense of responsibility that's their job, not somebody else's, and they have knowledge of results. So if they need to know how well they're doing. And so the features that you would design into a job, the core job characteristics that create these critical psychological states are these. To experience meaningful of work, it should require skill variety. I'll give you some student examples in a second, but Sarah had a lot of good examples of that as well. They should identify with the task. They should identify it as their own. The task should be significant in some way. somehow meaningful to them. There needs to be a sense of autonomy to experience responsibility. They have to believe that they're making the calls. And of course, you have to have feedback from the task. So in terms of skill variety, then, how do you increase it? You do a lot of different things. I would add to the list that Sarah and Joy have given so far is go beyond lectures and multiple choice exams. Exercises, role-playing, cases, discussion, designs, videos, essays, projects, etc. To increase task significance, what you need to do, again, is sell the topic. We talked about that. If you can, have them apply the topic to their own life, maybe a personal case analysis. In terms of increasing task identity and autonomy, I would recommend let students pick topics for assignments where that's feasible. And avoid or don't use group projects probably as much as we tend to, because that tends to reduce both of those, though it has other advantages. And finally, again, provide feedback. Turn around the graded work as quickly as you can, at least before the next similar assignment, quiz, or exam is due, is what I always recommend. And mark up papers significantly, which we talked about. And so that is pretty much what I wanted to talk about. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. As a wrap up, because I know it's 1, there's a survey. If you're here in Pullman, there's a blue piece of paper. It's the top paper of your handout. If you're on Zoom, Amina's going to post it in the chat. And then if you're in Tri-Cities, since y'all don't have that chat feature, you can see that in y'all's follow-up email. If you are in Pullman, can you make sure that you sign in to the sheet before you head out? And then Sarah, I think maybe we'll reach out to you to get all of those names from Tri-Cities to make sure that everybody gets their name and that attendance, if that's okay. Great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome, and the same thing with the handouts. So if you are in Zoom, not the Tri-Cities folks, but actually on Zoom in your computer, there are some chats in there, but the materials will be shared later. Thank you guys for coming, and thank you very much for all of our presenters. We'll give them another hand. Just another 30 minutes for open lab. So if you have to head out, don't feel bad. Also, if you're in Pullman, pizza.
What's the exact name of this training?
The name of this training.
Yeah.
Building an
If you just
environment
do
of success.
FLW, that's our cheat for faculty led workshop, and then it's building an environment for success.
Okay.
I would definitely mark at least FLW in there somewhere, because the one in 2 weeks has the same name. It's just the create and apply portion.
Gotcha.
Thank you. And if y'all want to just put them on the back of this table or hand them to me or Valerie or wherever, or even just leave them there. Yeah.
Can I make a couple follow-up comments?
Absolutely.
A couple things, and because my area is ELL, so I have not all, but a lot of international students, and some of them, these plans don't work for. For example, certainly not all my students are digital savvy. Absolutely, especially with things that are not available there. So YouTube, no, it's not available in their home country. They might not know how to use it, etc. They use WeChat instead of Twitter. They might not know, even undergraduates don't know educational technologies. They know social media. Completely different animals. So if you're going to introduce something new that's an educational technology, they may not know how to use it. You might need to model for them. Also, not all students are comfortable participating, depending on their backgrounds and their cultures, right? So I give my students, I say there's 100 points in this class for participation, but you can do it in these ways. If you prefer not to participate in a whole group class, you can put something, share a resource on the website in this way. You can ask questions of me and I'll explain to the whole class. You can email me and I'll explain to the whole class. So I provide them lots of different ways to participate because it's just not equitable in other ways. And then they learn slowly over time how to participate in the whole group. The other thing is that Tom was talking about fewer team projects, and in the College of Ed, we focus on a lot of ways to make those teams work. So we're really into kind of giving roles, saying there's 4 roles, these are what the roles do, decide in your team, which person's gonna do which role. So there's nobody that can just opt out. Those kind of things that are kind of concepts in collaborative and cooperative learning. So there are a lot of ways to make groups work, but you have to really explore those and make sure you implement them in useful ways to make the teams. And it doesn't mean that still that all teams are going to work, but it means that more teams will probably work than otherwise. That's all I wanted to add about that.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Go ahead and chime in.
Will all these presentations be available for us to review? Because there's a lot.
We were recording today's session, so.
Where's there? Starting from 12:28. Sorry.
But we'll give
Apparently it
the
wasn't automatic. I noticed
PowerPoints.
Yeah, that's what I-
PowerPoints available.
Sorry about that.
Yes. We'll put those PowerPoints online. And the handouts, you do have those on your form, but I'll also send them to
What's that?
you digitally.
Yeah.
Feel free to join smaller conversations. Don't feel like it has to be like a big, or go straight to like Joy or.
I have noted that in a number of presentations that come out that talk about diversity, nobody ever explicitly says language, and that just is an issue, and we should just acknowledge it instead of skipping around it. I mean, when I have students in class where English is not their heart language, and I try to be really careful about not using idioms, and really confusing them. I mean, that is an issue, and we need to address it more forthrightly.
Yeah, just so you guys know, don't make Star Trek references. They have no clue what it is. I have got to stop doing it because I'm dating myself. And I don't feel like I'm that old, just for the record.
Imagine how old mine are.
And they've remade the Star Treks too, so it doesn't make any sense. They're contemporary. Don't mention the Borg because it fits in psychology in a lot of places. And
Yeah, or what wearing a red shirt means.
yeah. Yeah.
And also, there is a front and a back to the blue sheet. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I
should
just
do like
noticed
an
that.
arrow or something.
Did anybody on Zoom have any questions?
I have one now.
Any chat questions?
It's funny, I wrote sort of the same thing. I wrote, is it based on
Hey, Tom.
fallacy victim?
Yeah.
I actually had that issue with, I don't want to say lecturing from the textbook. The problem was I wrote the textbook for the class. So last fall, the attendance was like 50%. So when you said that, it was like, it resonated, but it felt like a dagger because I had that issue. No bad way I mean that. This semester, this fall, I'm teaching the same class again. I went to a completely flipped design, all application based to get around that issue. So, yeah. I couldn't understand why. Here's the deal. I couldn't understand why my attendance was so low because the class is kind of popular. And then I was looking at all the work they were turning in for their big project, and they were doing it well. They were obviously reading, so they had to make that decision to read the book. The class was the same, and I did it that way. I know better than that, just for the record, but I just wrote the book. I wanted to make sure it worked. What I wrote flowed, so I wrote my PowerPoints directly from it. In retrospect, that was probably stupid, but I was able to fix some issues I saw by doing it. But yeah, it didn't work, and the students were saying they loved the class. I thought my ratings were going to be horrible. I had some of my best ratings in the class, but I had that exact issue, so I adjusted this semester, and it's working really well with the
Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah, I've never been brave enough to write my own textbook. I would fear that I would wonder what I would do in class as well.
Yeah. I was wondering what I was doing in class. Why I was doing it.
I want to come back and talk a little bit about participation, and I'm going to quibble with
Did you hear Matt need to sign in?
Yeah.
Julian, do you guys?
No, the other comment on team projects is that it's essential
But
in the
I don't know if you can hear me.
college engineering arts.
We can hear you.
Because one of the
Yeah,
soft skills
so-
that recruiters look for is the ability to work in
And also, I was thinking about that cartoon.
People you may or may not like.
What's equitable?
You know,
It's always
what I
been-
find with groups, same thing with like rubrics and certain things.
It's always been a dilemma for me.
So the collaboration,
Step away from the mic.
it doesn't really matter. It's the implementation.
Oh, now it's totally muted. That's what it meant either. And somebody just muted me. Okay. I can't hear you at all anymore. Now I can hear
Put
you.
something on top of that one.
Yeah, that's totally
Hey,
fine.
Shelley?
I think I have actually a student.
So, yeah, so anyway, I was just asking the table mic a little way for in their own conversation, because it's louder than the rest of you. And now I can't hear you at all.
Can everybody just quiet down? I'm so sorry. Okay.
You can turn the volume of that up too.
We can turn the volume up.
Anyway.
Okay, Dr. Tripp, here we go.
Thanks. So the thing about grading participation, and I mean open class
So right
participation,
now I'm doing a lot and they're.
and I've tried some of the things that Joyce suggested, and I've always found a trade-off between students. When I need students to speak in class, or my class doesn't work, it relies very much on back and forth. Then what happens is they'll go to these other means, and I'll never hear from them in class. And it's always been a bit of a dilemma for me, realizing that some people more in class than others, and there are, of course, international differences in that. And the resolution I found is to make the grade component big enough that it grabs their attention, but not so big that if they don't do it, it trashes their grade. For me, that's about 10% of their grade. And there are other things that they do working in small groups as well, where there's no issues whatsoever, counts towards 10%. And I find that to be pretty effective at getting everybody.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. That is important, especially for the feeling of inclusion. And just having been a student myself not too long ago, and in many math classes where the math classes are quite diverse, it is very important to make sure that the students know that you see them. And I do the same thing for the students in my current math class. They know that I see them, and they know that I care about them. And that just helps in regards to me just being able to relay information to them.
Right.
You know, so that's very important.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's really important that you know, they know that you know who they are. I agree with that 100%.
I love that bullet point, you know, and it made me think of yesterday in my math class, one of the gentlemen, he likes to act. And so I have several students who have families, you know, and so if I can figure out how to tie math to what is going on in their life, they're more keen to kind of plug in, you know. And I did have the student that came to me and told me that it's hard for him to pay attention in my class because he doesn't care about math. And he's having a hard time seeing how this is going to help him. And so I tried to explain just the ability to think logically. If anything, math sharpens your skill to problem solve. You know, even with children, math can be used to problem solve. In relationships, you know, math can be used to problem solve. And so it's very good. I love that point you made about just knowing who your students are beyond the classroom. That's important.
A simple tip for that some of you may have tried is I always take pictures the first day of class when they have their name tent out. And then I just go and I memorize all the faces and names, and I can walk in second class and know who they all are, and then that lets them know that I know who they are.
Same here, and they're surprised when you come the second or third day and you know all that you're calling on them by name. It's like, whoa. Do you remember me?
Do you remember me? Yes, those little things, that's important.
Tom, does the business school still have, when my ex was the dean, they had you guys had a mandatory grade curve. You were there then, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't, and I don't know who your ex is actually.
Len Jessup.
Ah, okay.
No laughing.
So that was 20 years ago almost, right? And we did have in some departments, there was a mandatory grade curve, but it wasn't in all departments. And I don't believe any department has that now.
I have a random question. One of the things that we always talk about is authenticity, making it make sense to your kids, right? So as an instructional designer, I get to help a bunch of different courses. If I'm talking to a UCore course versus in the major course, that conversation looks very different. So if I'm in my major and it's 300, 400 level, for me, it's very easy. I teach pre-service teachers about teaching math. So boom, I mean, it's nothing but authentic, right? But what are the kind of challenges that y'all have and how do y'all overcome them for things like, okay, my students are in the UCore or they're an English major in my biology class or a biology major in my English class. And, you know, the things where they and especially math, you'll see that a lot, where they don't, it's not an easy connection for how they're going to use it. So I kind of want to see if y'all have experienced that.
In my class, in all my teacher education classes, I teach my students, no matter what they're going to be teaching, to make connections. So I give them a random set of topics from all the disciplines, and I say you need to connect this, you know, to your students' real lives. And it's an exercise that they go through so that they can do it no matter what it is. And I would encourage faculty to kind of think about, no matter who my students are, right? Why do they need to know this thing? What's the most common denominator? Least common denominator? See, I'm not a math person, obviously, but most common denominator?
Greatest common
Denominator, right? So they go through, well, for example, if they have to study geography and they don't care about it, well, you know, what is it about something? And then what about maps? Well, maybe they don't need maps, but place. They all have a place, right? And so that I can work that back to understanding other places. So it's that common, yes. It'd be fun to have an exercise like that with, you know, a group of faculty from different disciplines.
I would love some more people do cross-disciplinary stuff.
You do that specifically to your course, like skills or outcomes from your course, to like just life things, or do you mean like you do like all university courses to
whatever the discipline is? Yeah, I want them to be able to think about for themselves and for their future students. Yeah, how does it relate? We had the hardest time, math people, to figure out why fourth graders needed to learn rounding. I asked Molly, I asked a whole bunch of different people, and finally we figured out because they need to be able to estimate all kinds of things, even if they're in fourth grade. But it took some really hard thinking to figure out rounding. Why do they need to round? It was like, Mom, can I have 20 bucks? This thing I want costs, 18 something and there'll be tax, right? You don't say, Mom, can I have $18.47? So those kind of things.
I would add to that. I think one of the ways to really apply Joy's advice in the UCore course is to remember that each UCore course is supposed to advance university learning goals. So if you take biology, for example, it's not so much that every student needs to know biology, it's that every student needs to be scientifically literate and engage in scientific thinking. And that's the reason why those courses are required, and with the 7 university learning goals, you have scientific literacy. So I think one of the things that you can sell everybody on, and I think it's the greatest common denominator, is the notion of scientific literacy, and convince them why they need that. One of the arguments I give my students is because without it, they can be too easily fooled.
Well, I'd give them specific examples, even from your own personal experience, and that really, yes, I agree.
Transparency is important, I think. I mean, not too much, but just especially to know that, hey, I used to be a student too. I used to struggle. Maybe some of you didn't struggle, but in school I struggled. And so just to be relatable, I don't want to appear like I'm some floating being in front of the classroom, So yeah. Any other thought? Oh, go ahead.
We in our online research methods course and one of our other courses online, we've had group work in the class, and the group work has failed miserably. We just converted this semester to roles. Smaller groups, and has a role so they can't social live. So,
there you go.
Yeah, we just did that. When you said that, I looked up, it's like, that's what they're doing right now.
Well, there's a sheet that they do, and it's not anonymous, but it's unseen by team members about how each team member performed. They just check off, my team member did this, or they didn't do this, they didn't do this. 2 minutes, boom.
And then to kind of make them personalize what we're doing in the classes right now, I was telling Tom, went to a flip design in my Psych 328 class. At the beginning of class, I'm using another design also concurrently where we do like parent shares in the beginning. So it was like a quick reading check, says everything is flipped now, their onus is on them to read, which it always has been, but really it needs to be with the flip design. And then do like a quick parent share in the beginning where one other student or two other students, because there's an odd number in the class, and then I have holistic kind of questions on why the overall what we're going to cover today is important to hopefully establish that why this is important to me, why I need to care about it. So I'm actually doing a master's in, she knows, in curriculum instruction at UI right now. So I'm trying to supplement my PhD. But when you guys were talking, I'm like, you making notes I send this book. I'm reading. I'm sitting in this class today because I got to have this assignment for one of our classes on it, but I would have came anyway. So, and it's like I'm sitting there going, yeah, this is really cool. These are the topics we're actually talking about right now, and the autonomy and stuff like that. So we're trying to integrate some of that into our classes. One of our big problems, and it's working right now. So I know you know about it a little bit. We're trying to take these large online courses with 80 students. That's when you're trying to run a discussion board with that many students, there's just too many. So we're breaking them into smaller groups. And I've got 3 IRB approved research projects around this right now, just came through this week. And we're trying to break it down like groups of 8 to 10 students, depends on the class. And then they have an instructor interaction there. And ironically, we had an email from a student in another class where they don't have this yet, complaining about the fact he's not getting frequent enough feedback from the instructor involvement. And I just wrote back and said, well, it's funny because we're actually running this small group pilot, and then I've got a large group survey we're going to send out to the students in large group classes, asking them, what would you think about being in a class like this, just to see, kind of set up stuff for next semester. But I'm going to start, it looks like it's working really well, and I like it. It's a little more complicated on the faculty side of things, tracking stuff, but it's easy. We've gotten used to it. But because, Christy, I have those instructional TAs, we've got student perspective. I have in our Psych 497s, we have instructional TAs, and they actually teach part of those classes. So they teach 2 weeks, and they get the same training my grad instructors get online and my adjuncts. So the ITAs, I have one of them who's literally, she's doing it in 2 classes, which is not something we normally do, but she is this semester. One small group, one large group. I brought her into the project to get feedback from a student instructor perspective. Then you got the faculty instructor perspective, and then we're going to get student perspective and see if this really can work out. But we've gotten good feedback so far. I mean, the smaller groups, again, it's minimizing that social loafing. Like in the group, there's only 8 students. You can't just wait for somebody else. You look in there's no posts and stuff. But the biggest fear students have had is, are there going to be enough posts to actually respond to them? But there have been, and we've been kind of spacing our posting out, so we're not putting up too many posts in the beginning and everybody responds to us and gets their participation requirement achieved, and then they don't care the rest of the way. We're trying to spread it out. But another research area was, what does it mean when students are participating late in the week or too early and they're not integrating space or doing a spaced performance, and because they're missing out. If they're doing everything early, yeah, they're trying to be ahead. They're trying to be, I want to get everything done. I want to, engage in the conversation, as opposed to the ones at the late, they're missing so much, either too early, too late. So we're trying to, that's another research project I got to run, but I'm trying to do that to see which is the better way. It's just hard to see students, you only can participate, this certain way.
There's some really good research about that's come out in the last even 5 years.
Yeah. I imagine it's going to grow more because online's become so much bigger everywhere. But we're trying to see if we can get students a model where we can have students pace their posts. But sometimes it's just getting them to do it. Sometimes is the important thing. And as long as they do it, that's good. But it can't be that they can go up on Sunday, make all their posts for the week, and just lose a point or 2 or 3 points for being late on the discussion question post and get their post in. They haven't learned anything. They're just doing it. Same point I made to instructors. If you're going in there Sunday night making posts, you're just doing it to meet a requirement for me because you're afraid I'm going to come and check as director and catch you doing it. I mean, you can't. That's no value to the students. So, and the reason why students do that late is the same reason why an instructor would do it. So I try to mold the instructor's performance so they're spacing out their performance, and I got it integrated into their behavioral contracts from the start, which works out kind of good. But yeah, I'm in 4 classes into this program right now, and it's like the information I'm taking in is like, whoa. And I've done this stuff before. I do OER stuff. I'm big into OER stuff, and writing, I'm trying to get the macro curriculum established, and people don't understand that we have the curriculum from the OERs in individual classes, but if you look across all the textbooks we've written, and we've got 7 now in psychology, we've got the most, I think, out there, and then other classes with it, we got about 15 covered. It's a macro curriculum feeding into everything, and kind of getting students to realize all of our courses linked together. A lot of the textbooks do this puzzle kind of thing, like, hey, it's all a puzzle in all these classes, but they never explain it beyond. And so who cares? So getting students to actually see through the books, they are linked. And the publisher's defense is they can't do that. They have separate authors running books and they're not involved. So I'll shut up. I got to go to class anyway.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
The group work, after the roles, and Joy, you said that you give them the feedback form immediately right there while they're in the group, and they fill it out right there.
Well, when they're done with their work.
Are they still sort of sitting with each other while they're doing it, or
Not
this is?
necessarily.
Oh, okay. I'm
They
curious.
can go online and fill it in, or
Oh, I see.
I hand it out and say, put this on my door or something. It depends on what the group is.
Our instructor has them doing like a journal, like journal entries, or like the part of the group's performing is they have like a mid-semester group member evaluation they do, and when at the end, to kind of keep them recording what's going on, tracking the group progress, and then kind of evaluating each other as they go along. And if you know that evaluation is coming, you'll be less likely to social loaf. First semester doing it, we'll see how it goes, but it sounds like what we set up, and then hearing what you said, it kind of said we're on the right track at least. I think we are. We're integrating a lot of new things into the classes, trying to diversify the online program, but it sounds like we're on the right track. That's good.
And Tom, you
Software that's come out now that actually does all that for you. There's CatMe, which a lot of people have used. College of Business is trying out something from EduSource that does that as well, that we're hoping to bake into. We now are going to have a required Teams course to do kind of what you're talking about, Joy, which is make sure that students are trained in proper practices, so that when we get these later, they know what the roles are and know how to implement the roles, so that you don't have social loafing, excessive conflict, demotivation, etc.
And I do have a question for all the presenters. How would you define group work? Am I imposing group work on my students if at one point in my lecture I say compare answers or discuss answers? Is that considered group work?
No,
Okay.
that's talking to your elbow partner.
Talking to your elbow partner. Okay.
Yeah. Or think pair shares, it also sort of fits that. Now, most people, when they mean group work, it's outside of class time where classmates have to get together and perform some activity that's graded.
Okay.
They have a mutual outcome.
Okay.
I try to give my students time in class so I can watch the groups, how they develop, and kind of cut off any problems ahead of time. And really, they have, in College of Ed, they have group work in every single class, every single semester. It's impossible to meet with 5 different groups. So there has to be a way for them to do the group or they won't do it. So, yeah.
Okay.
I have a question about the video assignment that you were talking about. Is that, like when you do the green screen video, is that like an in-class thing, or is that like over several classes, or like a major project?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So like, is it something that is doable to do like in a,
Yes.
like a 50-minute class?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
actually, we just went to a conference and we had everybody in the conference make a video with 2 other people they didn't even know about what was the topic.
Just like with their phones?
They can
You
use
mean
their
like
phone, they can use
camcorders?
laptop, whatever.
Oh,
We
nice,
had, we
okay.
had tools there. We just took our sheet with us, put it up and said, here's the outline, here's the kind of the steps, here's open shot, a handout, how to use it, boom. And they were not exceptionally tech savvy people.
Yeah.
But they can also do it out of class. I mean, I have taken the sheet and posted it in the hallway so that students didn't have to get into the classroom or whatever, and they come and they take their videos and they pop it in open shot because it's accessible to everyone, it's free. Yeah. Oh, have you used Jing in your English classes?
Yes.
You don't like that?
It's okay for some students.
Right, exactly right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have some students who are, particularly my students with dyslexia or dysgraphia, really like the auditory feedback.
Yeah.
They could see like me looking at their paper and talking about it and
Yeah.
clicking. Other students say, I need everything that you said
Written down.
written down.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're really differentiating, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
Wow. I think English classes are the hardest if you're collecting essays and stuff to do all those things, but
Yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's saying like get feedback quickly, like that's,
Yeah,
we don't have TAs or graders or anything, and so it's all the in-class activities, grading those, plus our big projects and we're portfolio classes, so it's,
You never have a TA? No. Oh my gosh.
yeah. I remember teaching you.
yeah.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
that's always kind of our constant
Yeah.
battle is.
So one of the things
Managing
for
all
me
of that.
is, like when we do papers in the graduate classes, first part, introduction, let's look at that. So because I can't look at, 25 whole, really badly written papers at once. So we do it piece by piece. And, I mean, it's more often grading, but it's not as long and tedious grading, so I can get through it really right in our class. So, wow,
Thank you.
that's the
And I
hardest.
have a question for Sarah.
Oh, yes, Sarah? Sarah, can you hear us?
hear you. Sorry, we were having our own discussion here.
Oh, that's okay. We have a question for you.
Okay.
Hi, this is Haixia, and I
Hi.
have a question. We have the class Universal Design for Learning, and so I'm kind of confused because we have mentioned a lot of time before maybe UDL appear, so there's a engagement, but now it is one of the principle of UDL. So is that means that engagement related with technology, we can consider it all belong to UDL principle? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, now say that, so let me see if I heard you right. So you said you're asking if it's part of UDL or if that's how you should be viewing it now. Is that what you said?
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, engagement, it maybe appeared long before the principle of UDL. Engagement is one of the principles of UDL. So I just want to know the relationship because I sometimes confused when I say, oh, engagement. And the engagement there is also something related with technology. So can we consider that to be the principle of UDL?
I mean, yes.
Someone's in this room at 1:30.
A lot of times you'll see each of them in isolation, just because they weren't necessarily, they don't come from UDL. They were things that UDL has brought, that people that created UDL have brought in as being, research-based practices, and they've created the framework based on brain research. And so, so you can hear about, a lot of times you'll hear people just talking about high engagement teaching strategies. And that's just teaching strategies that get people excited about learning, involved in their learning. The key is we want them making their own learning, because the brain tells us when we work with material, we develop our own learning and we learn it better. So UDL has just included it as part of the framework because it fits nicely in, there's research behind why they chose engagement. And the same with representation is, you can teach information in a variety of ways and you don't necessarily have to think about it as UDL. It's more of a universal design for learning is just a general framework that they plugged pieces into based on how the brain understands information and takes it in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. We're getting kicked out of the room.
Your studies, right? They're taking.
All right,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.